Hello everyone, welcome back to Powerful Nothing and Magic the Gathering Cube podcast. I'm your host Dan, Ben on the Nintendo 2-Sweet MTG, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host James. James, how are you doing? Are you well?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. My flat has recently had the exciting new addition of functioning hot water again. We've been down that for a few days, so that's good news. I've had an actual warm shower, which has put me in a much better mood, and ready to chat about some Cube.
Ooh, decadent.
I know, right? I know. Really treating myself today.
No, definitely. Well, yeah, we have a fun episode for everyone today. Today, we're going to be talking about Magic the Battling, an MTG format inspired by the Autobattler genre. So this has been around for about 6 to 9 months now. It was designed by Ryan Saxe, who is quite well known in the Cube community. The classic Cube was spotlighted on MitGo a few years ago, and he also had a very interesting episode on Solly Singleton a few years ago. It was a really good level up episode in terms of Cube design. We'll put a link down to everything Ryan Saxe related in the show notes below. But the Autobattler is his newest project, and this is something that we put together, and we've actually been playing quite a lot of, James. We've actually everyone who we've introduced this to has been messaging, when is the next Autobattler? When are we doing it again? All I can think about when I go to sleep at night is Autobattler.
Yeah, Dan's being harassed in our WhatsApp group to organize more Autobattler drafts, so I think that's pretty good feedback.
Yeah, 100%. It's fastly becoming my favorite way to do drafting with 4 players. So we have talked about 4-player two-bits and 4-player cubes on this podcast before. This is kind of in line with that, but it is also very different as well. We'll kind of give an overview of the project before we kind of dive into little bits. So kind of when you look at the list of the Autobattler, it looks like a cube, but the main thing to note is that the gameplay pattern is very different. It's lots of quick drafts with lots of quick games. It's really good for people who think that drafting is the best part of Cube. It was inspired by Autobattlers that have kind of risen in popularity over the last couple of years. Ryan Saxe is going to try to take the best parts of that and make it work with Magic. The idea of this is that you're building the best small hands of cards possible. It starts with a 3-card hand growing at regular intervals, and as you draft, you get better decks, you do more cool things, the decks get more powerful. The drafting is kind of like the shop mechanic in a classic Autobattler, and there's also upgrades that you can take to improve your cards, and you can end up with some really cool, unique decks. As your pool's getting bigger, you can also have multiple decks. You can have a deck that's strong against one player or one kind of deck, and then you can pivot if you think you're playing against someone else in the next round. You can kind of build a cool sideboard deck against them as well. And importantly as well, unlike most Autobattlers that I've seen out there, with this, you are actually playing the games of Magic. It's not deterministic. You are drafting and you are playing. So even if you're someone who likes playing Magic more than drafting, you will still enjoy this because it's lots of quick drafts and it's lots of quick games. You still play. Your decisions in the game do matter.
Yes, for sure. I think you make a lot more decisions in the drafts than you do in the games, but that doesn't mean the decisions in the games are easy, because you're really thinking through what your opponent is likely to have put in their deck, because there is no element of randomness in the cards in your hand, right? They are, other than the cards you saw during the drafts, they're all there for a reason. Your opponent always has the plan they were going in with in their hand, because there is no deck. It is just you have every card in your starting hand and all the mana you're going to get, really. So they are going to have the ability to execute the game plan they had going in. So you've got to be prepared for that. You can't be hoping your opponent had a clunky draw.
No, exactly. And that part of it makes it still feel like Magic, which is a nice onboarding level. We'll jump into the rules of the thing in a bit more detail shortly, but the main thing is it's different, but it still feels like Magic, which is definitely something from listening to Ryan Saxe talk about it and read his articles and stuff, is definitely, he wants to take the best of Autobattlers, but make it work in Magic, but not do, things have to work within the Magic rules. That's why one thing we'll get onto is poison is in it as a way of tracking overall life totals and stuff. And as Magic players, we know that if you get to 10 poison, you lose the game. That's a thing in this. It kind of takes it, it kind of carries it over. So everything kind of does make sense. Cool. So worth mentioning before we dive any further, a link to the Cubecobra list with the full rules will be down below. There might be updates to the rules in the future. At time of recording, we are on version 1. Loading Ready Run did a playthrough of this a few months ago. They were using like a beta version. Like there's been some updates, and I'm like, what we are going through is like as far as I'm aware, the released 1.0 version of the rules. But if there are any changes, that link will contain the most up-to-date versions. Also, this project is made up of two halves. Effectively, we have the rules of the Autobattler, like the system that we are playing within, and then you have the actual list of cards that you are playing with. We've been playing with the main list of cards that Ryan Saxe has created and put together, but there are other lists out there. There are budget versions on his Cubecoder profile. You could also make your own lists, which is something we'll touch on a little bit later as well. But like in theory, James, you could play this with any cube.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think the innovation and the thing you really want to start with is the rule set. I think the rule set is really well thought out, actually. There's a lot of things where I thought, reading the rule set, we could do this a bit differently, we could do this a bit differently. And then once you've played it, you're like, no, I totally understand why you did it this way, and that's great. I think it comes across to me that I imagine there's been quite a lot of testing gone into this rule set. I think it feels very well tuned. I think it works really well. I think you could make a lot of very different changes to the cube list within that rule set and still have it work really well. There's certain types of cards you very much want to avoid, obviously. And the obvious things like card draw doesn't work, nothing that interacts with your library. But also things like, I think you really don't want to be like fort seizing people in this cube. I think that would play really badly. So I think there's a few sort of guidelines to go with that of how you should construct a cube for Autobattler. But I think within that, there's huge scope for creativity here about what little packages of synergies and combos you run, and how high or low power you want it to be. This list feels actually very high power to me in a way where it didn't reading it, but having played it within the context of these rules, the decks are very powerful in the late game. So yeah, I think there's a lot of scope for difference there.
100%. Like in the games that we played, it does definitely feel like you start off with kind of just like, it feels like it's the D&D thing of like you feel like you start off feeling like you've walked into a tavern and been given a sword, and you end up feeling like a god who can move a mountain with your deck. It's kind of like the curve, like the games do ramp up and you are able to do some very cool things. But kind of like, let's go over the mechanics of the Autobattler before we get into some bits about kind of like decks we have built and we have played with and we have liked, and then kind of like our own thoughts on packages or decks you could either add to Ryan's list, or if you wanted to make your own, things you could consider. So ideally, you are starting this with a pod of 4 players. It can work with other players. Even is definitely better because everyone's playing at the same time. It's lots of quick games. You don't really want to have people like buys can really mess up the math a little bit with this. That's been the main thing we've kind of discovered. But like 4 works perfectly with this because in theory, people don't have to move chairs. You can just play across pods and stuff. But the setup is each player gets 7 cards to start with. They then have to build a starting deck of 3 cards for the first game. You start with the whole deck in your hand, and you don't lose for not having a library. So like Thassa's Oracle doesn't work in this. You'll start the game with 3 basic lands of your choice in play, and also a treasure. So you start with your mana, you start with your deck in your hand, you are ready to go. Kind of like, James, kind of like, what have you seen like a solid 3-card starting deck look like? Because like, in theory, you're not going to have your ultimate combo. It's kind of going to be a bit cobbled together. Kind of like, what does an early deck look like?
Yeah, so these are the decks which are going to look most like, here are my good cards. They're really the most balanced decks you'll be using actually throughout the event. Because obviously they'll be very fair. You won't have combos. You'll have some threats and some ways to interact with your opponent's threats. You have to bear in mind that your opponents probably have at least 1 piece of interaction in their 3 cards, and they'll be able to cast it in response to your threat. So you need to build a pool that isn't dead to your opponent having 1 counter spell or 1 removal spell. Because bear in mind here as well that to achieve anything, you have to win the game. Just dealing with your opponent's threats isn't enough. A rule which I think is a very positive rule for this reason is if you draw, you essentially both lose. So you do need to make sure that you can win the game through some interaction. A very common setup would be something like 2 threats, 1 removal spell, or 1 counter spell. You might also think about if you had, say, a very powerful 4 or 5 mana threat, you might include a mana source in your 3. You could do something like a Accelerant, a Frag Tusk, for example, and a removal spell, because your Frag Tusk, even if they kill it, is going to leave something behind. So that's maybe worth giving up the extra threat for. Although you're taking on some risk there, if they counter your Frag Tusk, you're in a lot of trouble. That third slot is, I guess, where you have a bit of a threat. But yeah, I think you're really almost always going to want a piece of interaction and obviously at least 1 threat. The final thing to say is, if you have ways to make treasure in your pool, in your 7, you should try quite hard to play them in your deck, because treasure is a game piece that will persist post the game. Even if you lost, if you made some treasures, that might actually be okay with you. I think we'll discuss that a bit more later. But if you have those early treasure sources, they're really, really good here. The treasure actually sort of really helps you set up for later in the game.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that'll definitely be more of a thing, and we'll point that out in a moment. So when you've built your 3-card deck, you play against someone random in the pod, and you roll to see who goes first. For later games, it's the player with the higher poison count that goes first. As you lose games in this format, you get poison counters. So effectively, the worse you are doing, it guarantees that you are going first. That's a nice little level set there. And importantly, in these games, you start on 10 life. James, how have you found these kind of early games to be? Like you mentioned, it was very bread and butter. It's very much, I have 2 threats and a removal spell, or I have threat, removal spell, counter magic. Kind of like how have you found these kind of go? Like most of the games in this format tend to be quite quick, but do you think these are kind of the quickest?
They have more turns than a lot of the subsequent games, because you're just not killing people as quickly. These are, unsurprisingly, if you only have 3 cards in your deck, 2-for-1s are very, very powerful. Anything that looks like a 2-for-1 is going to do God's work for you here. Real overperformers I've seen, for example, Heartless Pillage, pretty busted on 3 cards. That's basically a mind vault. If you attack, it gives you a treasure. That card's kind of cracked. If you're on the play, you just cast that on turn 1 and they have 1 card left and you have 2. That's pretty cracked. So like Coligan's Command I found to be really good. Like they kill your creature, you get it back, you either get a card out of them or kill a creature. I found that card to be very powerful. Some of the big threats, if you have some acceleration to go with them, can be good. Stuff like Frag Tusk I mentioned, Worm Coil Engine. Sometimes these are actually castable in your 3-card deck, because there is actually really powerful acceleration in here. Stuff like Grim Monolith is in, Mana Vault is in, Solving is in. Weird wrinkle of this format, actually. Like Mana Vault much better than Solving, I think. Because you have so much fewer cards, right? You don't care so much about repeatable mana. You want to cast your one big thing.
There are also lands in the cube as well. So you always start with 3 lands, but if you get a Underground Sea in your pool, you can play that. So you have access to a 4th land, but you're down like effectively you have 1 less card in your pool because it's a land. So
yeah, for sure,
it can be worth it if you're trying to either fix or if you're trying to play a bigger spell and go over your opponents.
Yeah, and you're and those cards can be good for 4 and 5 drops, but I would say your bar should be pretty high for including mana source in your 3-card deck. You've got to be doing something really, really good with that, because you are essentially down a card in every real way. And when that card is a third of the cards you can see throughout the whole game, that's a very real cost.
100%. Yeah. So you've played your game. At the end of the game, both players get an additional treasure, and the loser gets a poison counter, as we mentioned. If it's a draw, both players get a poison counter, and importantly, you can't concede, because there are some cool ways but because specifically treasures carry over to other games and to the drafting part, we're on to in a moment, mucking with treasures later in the game can be a strong way of metagaming things.
Yeah, so you can't deprive your opponent of the opportunity to make a bunch of treasures when they've already essentially won the game and killed all your threats. And you can't deprive them of the opportunity to blow up all of your treasures after they've already demonstrated they can kill you. That's something that's happened to me quite a lot in this format.
There are ways of making more treasures in this format. Treasures going through to the draft are always capped at 5, so you can't take infinite treasures through if somehow you've built a Rube Goldberg engine to carry treasures through. Treasures are always capped at 5 when you move over to the draft. So after the game, each player gets a card at random from the cube and adds it to their pool. So your deck also so your card pool has gone up by 1 after this game. You then get to draft. You get a 5-card pack randomly from the cube, and you can swap any cards in your pool with a card in that pack. So if you don't like 3 of the cards in your pool and you like 3 of the cards in the pack, you can swap them. This is kind of the shop mechanic of the Autobattler. But there is something a little bit extra. The treasure that you have been given and you have possibly generated in the game, you can use the treasure to shuffle the pack away and get a new pack of 5. And you can do that after you've already swapped some cards out. This is very much the shop mechanic of Autobattlers. So you can really be like, you have this nice question of like, do I use my treasure in a game to try and win a game, or do I keep it for the draft section to kind of help sculpt my future decks? James, what are you looking for in the drafting phase? Like, are you looking to improve the deck you have? Are you looking to pivot? Kind of like, what are high picks for you?
Yeah, so really for me, it's not a question of if I'm going to pivot. It's a question of when I'm going to pivot, because as we've mentioned previously, the late game decks in this format are very, very powerful. We're talking about decks that can win on turn 1, often with some disruption.
We've seen decks win on upkeep.
We'll
get onto that.
I have lost in my own upkeep through a counter spell. Your deck is not going to sort of incrementally improve to a point where it can do that. If you just look for small incremental upgrades to your round 1 deck, you're just not going to get there. So the most important thing I'm looking for when I'm drafting early is stuff that gives me outs to get a really powerful engine going. I'm not going to get there right away. I'm not going to get there on like the first round of drafting, but I want to give myself the maximum amount of opportunities to do that as I see more cards as the game progresses, right? Generally, if you think about your deck on a sort of power level scale of say 1 to 10, and your starting deck will be like a 2 or whatever, I'm not really looking to sort of get 0.5 stronger each time we draft. I'm looking to go from like a 2 to a 6 or a 7 all in one go once I've pieced a combo together, right? Is really my long-term plan here. But we're not going to get there right away. How we are going to get there is by seeing a ton of cards, and that's where the treasure comes in, right? So early on, you should be prioritizing as you draft cards that make treasure quite a lot. Often, I think if you can make a lot of treasure, it's okay if you lose the game early, because you only get 1 poison counter for losing the game early. You have 10 poison counters to play with. As in a normal game of Magic, your life total is a resource here. You can take some losses early if you're building to a good late game. In the first round of a game, like, how many treasures do you think is worth a poison counter? Like, if you could lose the game but get 2 treasures, or win the game and have no treasures, what do you think the number is there? Is it 3 treasures? Is it 4 treasures? Is it 2 treasures?
I think early in the game, oddly, like, I would rather be up 1 treasure than win the game. I think.
One treasure.
Like, the worst case scenario is you lose the game and you've used your treasure. That is the utter worst case scenario. Like if you kind of see your opponent play out their stuff, it is worth not cracking your treasure to try and play your 4-drop if it's just going to, if you're still going to lose. Like, the 2 of these I have won. I think I have lost every game in the first round.
Yeah, I can believe it. Yeah,
because it honestly, just like the early rounds are there, but they are important when it comes to the math, and it does kind of tee up who's playing first and second later on, and it does change the type of deck you're building. But yeah, I think very early on, it's the treasures that are important. The poison comes more important later on.
Yeah, I could see that. I think 1 poison and 1 treasure are pretty close early on in value. See, that very much changes as the game goes on. But yeah, I think that's probably correct.
That's what I would say.
So I'm I'm okay sacrificing power level early to make treasure. I'm also prioritizing cards that make me treasure a lot early. They're sort of a second priority after powerful late game proactive combo cards. Then the other thing I'm looking for is cards that will be good interaction pieces in the late game. Because you're not the only one who's hopefully going to be doing busted stuff, you need to interact with your opponent's busted stuff, and you need to protect your own busted stuff. Generally, because you're going to get to add more cards, right, as you go through, your late game pile will maybe have like 3, maybe 4, maybe 2 cards that combine to do something very powerful and win you the game, and then your other slots are going to be ways to protect that and ways to interact with your opponent. And there aren't a ton of great ones, so I'm prioritizing those quite highly early as well. And then honestly, kind of the lowest level of priority is looking at my hand, what am I actually going to register in the next game to try and win it?
That's a you thing. I am still, yeah. No, I do see that.
Yeah, but the good thing is you're seeing a bunch of cards, right? It doesn't cost you to swap in and out of your pool, so you will get to incrementally upgrade those decks, because even though you're building to a late game, you still need to like present something reasonable for a game in front of you. But you will see cards and they'll enable that you to do that. Often the hard decisions you're making are when you take cards, you also have to put cards back. So it's a question of what to hang on to. I would say, prioritize hanging on to respective late game stuff quite highly, actually. If a card is kind of not a late game card and not currently in your deck, like even if you just cut it from your deck and you're looking and think, well, should I just cut this? Surely this isn't like the worst card in my pile. It's probably not getting back in, actually, if it's not good in the late game. So that's a good one to send back.
Yeah, just one thing I wanted to touch on. So you use the word combo to describe your deck, but like that doesn't just mean like Kiki Jiki Deceiver Exarch as an example. It is a combination of cards, because like in this format, like something like True Name Nemesis, Giant Growth, Berserk, that is a combo of cards that will kill your opponent. It's not specifically it's a combination of cards that work together rather than just like A plus B equals I win. Like effectively, that is what it is. But it's any combination of cards that can get your opponent down to 0 life and win your game. That could be like a Staxy style of thing. It could be hand attack, the rack, or something like that. That is decks you can do in this.
Yeah, for sure. And you really have to reevaluate a lot of these cards in the prism of this cube, right? Because a lot of stuff like putting pump spells on my True Name Nemesis is like, in normal Magic, be like, yeah, but what if I don't draw my True Name Nemesis? That sounds rubbish. In this format, you always draw your True Name Nemesis if you have it in your pool. So that sort of strategy can really work.
Definitely. So after you've drafted, you build your next deck, and then you play against someone that you haven't played against yet. After that game, you get an extra treasure, and you get another random card. You draft again, you play again. After the third round, there is a slight difference here. This is kind of like the round timer. Everything kind of ticks up after 3 games. Rather than taking a card, you get an upgrade. So these are one of 4 conspiracies. If you don't know what conspiracies are, they are from from the 2 conspiracy set. There are additional kind of like game objects that effectively can upgrade a card. So you take one of these upgrades. You can either give a creature haste. You can have a creature enter with a ++1 counter on it. You can make a card be able to cast for any color of mana, or you can take a card that reduces the cost of a card by 1 generic mana. You can put a name of a card on one of these upgrades, and then at any point in the game, you can turn it up, and then it's constantly assigned to that card. So what I said earlier about like True Name Nemesis, you can take the upgrade that gives it haste. So then your True Name Nemesis will permanently then have haste. Or it could even be, with True Name, it's 1 blue. You could make it cast for a mana of any color, so you could run it in your mono white deck, for example. Like, these upgrades are very cool. Kind of like, James, how have you find them, and what cool effects have you done with these?
Yeah, these are really powerful. And they're important to evaluating the other cards in the cube, because some of them scale very well with these upgrades. They're generally not just about, oh, look, my creature has 1 more power with a +1/+1 counter. There are things like persist creatures in the cube, for example. A persist creature with the Conspiracy that makes Zento with a +1/+1 counter. Well, Persist back the -1/-1 counter. Those two counters just cancel out, and it can die again and come back again. So if you combine that with something like a Goblin Bombardment, that's a very straightforward 2-card combo that will win you the game. You can sort of think about it as you can do the Persist creature plus Goblin Bombardment plus something like Vizier of Remedies in regular cubes, right? Well, this Conspiracy means you don't need the Vizier of Remedies. So that's very, very powerful. The Haste one is, this is not in the late game a format where you want to be casting creatures and saying go and hope you get to attack with them next turn very often.
Yes. I was going to say, yeah. These decks have put up numbers. There are some very powerful pump spells. You can counter 10 very quickly, but they need to have haste, those creatures. Yeah.
So that one's huge. That also for things like the animator effects. So I think the last draft we did, my stack, which ended up going off way, was Collective Brutality, discarding a Mere Battlesphere, reanimate for Mere Battlesphere, because of that would be fine anyway, but they could just kill the Mere Battlesphere. With this Conspiracy, the Mere Battlesphere has haste, so you can attack right away. You deal 4 from the trigger when you tap all your Mere, and Mere Battlesphere now has 8 power. That's 12. That wins the game. So yeah, the Conspiracies are very, very much enablers for your late game rather than just incrementally, oh, look, my spell's a little bit better than it used to be.
I personally found the one that makes a card tap for any color mana be the best to take if you don't know what you are going to attach it to, because with these you can, once they're attached, they are stuck to that card, and like if you don't have it in your pool yet, like if you don't have something you want to use on these, I found this just to be very good, just from a mana point of view, because you only start with 3 lands in play. Like just being able to run 2 double pipped cards is very strong. Like I had a great. I ended up having this really solid deck with putting the Wooburg mana one on a flicker wisp that meant I could run it in the same deck as a Eternal Witness. Like just making mana better and more efficient can be very solid in this, and just like that's one I've liked. Just if you're not sure what you're going to be using it for, it means you can it means you can splash that Siege Rhino pretty easily, and then the reduced by 1/1. There are you start with 3 lands, you do have treasures, but there are 4 drops in here, there are 5 drops in here. There are 6, and there are very large creatures in here. There's some 12 drops. We'll get onto some of those a bit later. But the cost reduced by 1 can be very powerful if used on the right kind of card. Like I used it to middling effect, but I had a lot of fun on Sneak Attack. Making your Sneak Attack cost 3 so you can cast it in this format with your lands is very strong. So what's nice is that they are kind of flexible. Like I think they are flexible. They can work with your pool, or they can work with potential things. Like it's a nice level of complication to add to this, I found.
Yeah, for sure. I think all of the Conspiracies available have their place. I think the cost reducer one is really nice for some of the explosive but expensive cards. I remember the last draft, you cast some 2 mana Sneak Attacks. If I'm not incorrect, you can stack multiple Conspiracies, on one card.
I kind of went all in on Sneak Attack with that one. To be fair with you, it kind of worked. I did get to one shot a couple of people. Golter and Mavrin is more than 10, so if it works, it really works. But it does let you find your lane. But so once you've done your upgrades, importantly as well, the deck size also goes up by a card. So you're now building a 4-card deck. Also, once you've got an upgrade, the amount of poison you get after you lose a game goes up by 1 as well. This is what James was talking about earlier when he mentioned that kind of losing games early is not as bad if you are setting yourself up for the future, because losing a round 1 game, you only get 1 poison. 2 is twice as much. It really the games really do kind of like the power level goes up, but the end game comes in line with that, if that makes sense. In terms of hands getting bigger, James, how has that affected the decks and what you're playing? Are you just adding like I've personally found it unlocks another like level of like synergy with the deck, but like it can just be if you've already got a good deck, it can just add a additional level of redundancy. It can add like another counter spell. It can add another removal spell. Like, how have you generally found like adding additional cards to the pool to be?
Yeah, it opens up, to say, a lot of doors for your cards to synergize together in a way which is not just an A plus B combo, right? A card like, for example, Ephemerate is a card which I think is very, very strong in this cube. It does really powerful things. Yeah. But it's really hard to maximize that card in a 3-card deck because you either have to have 2 good ETB creatures plus the Ephemerate, in which case it can be kind of hard to have like enough interaction to really play a balanced game, and you can't protect your ETB creatures, or you can't protect your Ephemerate because you don't have room for interaction, right? Once you get into more cards, it lets you have the interaction and have the synergy. And so, yeah, it opens a lot of doors. And the 3-card games feel very much like fundamentals of building a balanced deck and then kind of rolling some dice a little bit. I feel like with the 3-card games, whereas the 4-card games, you're really starting to have a bit more of a plan just because you have kind of a flex slot in your deck in a way where you just don't in the 3-card ones.
Yeah, and because you know going into it that the hands will go up at certain intervals, that does affect to a extent how you're drafting, because you will need like your pool is getting bigger, but you need more playables that synergize. So ideally, as James has said before, the deck is getting stronger. Like, but that just also means that it's also synergizing better. It's not just if you already have something strong, you can add a counter spell. But ideally, it's like you've exponentially increased the level of the strength of your deck by adding that additional card to it. So let's keep going. So that loop of playing a game, getting a card, getting a treasure, drafting, you repeat that another 3 times. So every 3rd round, you get an upgrade instead of a card from a pool. The hand size goes up by 1, and the amount of poison goes up by 1 as well. So for a 5-card hand, it's 3 poison for a loss, and you have 2 upgrades. For a 6-card hand, it's 4 poison for a loss, and you get 3 upgrades. Realistically, games have tended to, when we played them, have tended to end around the 5-card hand mark. Because it's still Magic. Because as we mentioned, you're out of the game when you get to 10 poison. At the 3 poison a loss, generally speaking, like that's where we have found games tending to end. And as we mentioned, like that is the loop, the mechanics of the Autobattler itself. Kind of like, and as I mentioned at the start, there will be a link to the full rules in the show notes below. I'm gonna, James, how have you found that game loop? Like as a, take the cards out of it for a second, like as a way of playing Magic, as a kind of as a format, like effectively this is like a whole new way of playing Magic. Like, how have you found it?
Yeah, I really like it. One of the things I like is that as you loop through, so you're playing in each sort of loop, you play 3 rounds, assuming you're playing in a 4 against your 3 different opponents. I think one of the interesting dynamics is when you're building your deck for the first of those rounds, you could be playing one of those 3 people, right? So you don't have much information about what you're up against. But by the time you're playing the last one, you know who you're playing against, and you've seen them play their last games. So you know what their deck is doing. Obviously, they could pivot, but people generally will make 1 to 2 big pivots in the course of the whole game. So you can be reasonably confident that there's a good chance, at least, that what they're going to be doing against you is similar for what they did against their last opponent. So then you can start to metagame a lot more. And when there's 2 opponents, obviously there's a 50-50 split. You also know, if you know who your opponent is, you know if you're on the play or the draw. That makes a huge difference in how you build your deck. If I'm building my deck knowing that I have 2 possible opponents, but I have fewer poison counters from both of them, so I know I'm going to be on the draw, I'm going to build my deck very, very differently, because I'm going to want to have an instant to spend my mana on their turn. I'd much more highly prioritize playing something like a 3-mana counterspell, because that very cleanly uses my mana on their turn, counter their turn 1 play. If they counter back, fine, but that means they don't have that counter on my turn. and then I can do my game plan. Whereas if I'm on the play, I'm much more going to prioritize, say, something like a discard spell, which we talked about briefly why you shouldn't have stuff like Thoughtseize in the cube, but there are some discard spells. They're just things like Blackmail, which...
Blackmail's MVP of this format. It's a single black sorcery. Target player reveals 3 cards from his or her hand, and you choose one of them. That player discards that card. So early game, it's very strong because it's your whole hand, but later on, they can keep some secrets. But yeah. Blackmail's been an MVP in this format.
Yeah, that card's very strong. But if you know you're on the draw, it's kind of not that good, right?
Yeah.
So those... I like that process of you're getting more information about what you're playing against as the round goes on. I think that's quite a nice balance. I remember in the first time we played this cube, I had a deck based around my opponent discarding lots of cards in the early game. I had like a Blackmail and I think there was a Smallpox in there, maybe a Mind Rot, I can't remember exactly. But one of the players in our pod built the perfect meta anti-discard deck with like a Nullhide Ferox and the ability to empty their hand. So I had to take the Nullhide Ferox. And that was really cool. But there's a point where it's like, well, you could have 2 possible opponents. You can play the deck that's going to crush this one opponent but lose to the other, or you can try and build something balanced. And I think that's a pretty fun dynamic, actually.
Yeah, definitely. So I've listened to some interviews with Ryan Saxe, and that was one thing that he actually wanted to build, like to have into this kind of like spying on people's games is something you can do in auto battlers.
Oh yeah, so, it's actively encouraged, I think.
Yeah. So having that element of like paying attention to what your opponent is doing. Like normally in a cube draft, we're not like we might kind of watch a few games, but kind of like if it's early rounds, we're not really like making notes of like, oh, this player has that, this player has that. We are still trying to be like an element of like, I'm not going to pre-sideboard against my opponents. There's an element of that when you're kind of like casually doing a cube, or I do anyway. But in this, you are actively trying to pre-sideboard and get the perfect option against your opponents. And the thing I found is that like sometimes the late games I've really enjoyed with this is where you basically end up with this rock, paper, scissors of, well, my deck beats you, but doesn't beat you. And kind of like you have to kind of like either like thread the needle or you just commit to trying to do one. Like I found that part to be very enjoyable, kind of like just trying to play the meta as best you can. Like it is an added level of complexity that I really like with this.
Yeah, for sure. And it really exacerbates out as the so when you get towards the later rounds, everyone is very much established in a archetype, right? And but if your opponent knows who they're playing against in advance, well, they can kind of work out if their default deck is going to beat your default deck. And if it isn't, they're going to register something else that will, So you've got to be preparing for them to pivot. And there's a lot of different levels involved, because then maybe you're meant to pivot, right? If it's a one-on-one match and you just register what you played last time, then for your opponent to lose, they just didn't have any tools in their pool, but they probably did by that stage in the game, or they kind of have to have screwed up, right? If they knew exactly what your deck did, and then they can probably build a deck to beat it, So there is a point where, yes, you might have what you think is a very, very powerful strategy, which is hard to beat. But if you know the matchup in advance, people are going to be able to beat it, and you need to think about pivoting or having some sort of a curveball in there. It doesn't have to be a whole pivot, but having some sort of alternative angle of attack, which they might not expect.
Like it can be something as simple as taking being like the mono red deck, or like being like a mono green deck the whole way through, and taking the upgrade that makes a card tap for any color, and just taking a counter spell, taking a double blue counter spell that no one is expecting. Like you've not shown any protection up until any point, and now suddenly you have the answer. You've cut one of your combo, or one of your aggressive bits for a counter spell. That isn't something like it could be something as simple as that to kind of give you that little bit of edge, because realistically, this is like the most format of like, it doesn't matter, like all that matters is winning. It doesn't matter how much you win by. It really, like, just having the slight edge in this format is what matters.
Yeah, for real. And it's and the thing is, because you're making all of these decisions in deck building, right? the games they're not locked in, but they're if you submit the wrong deck, you're probably not going to be able to make up for it in the game, right? So you've really got to be anticipating your opponent's moves in deck building. It can't just be here are my cards, I'll figure it out.
Cool. So kind of that's the game loop. That is the auto battler rule set. But kind of the second piece to that is the list itself that Ryan Saxe has put together. So a link to Ryan's list will be down in the show notes below. It has the rules, but the actual list itself is there as well. You can look at that. You can copy that. You can use it as a base for your own cubes or your own versions of this. What you kind of see is that from looking at it, it looks kind of like a normal cube. It's 272 cards. There's like around 35 of each color. There's 24 colorless cards. There's 4 of each 2-color pair. There's 1 of each 3-color pair. Like there's 1 of each dual land. Like it does look like a regular cube, and I think that is a good way to start off, because the rule set, you're already changing like the way people draft and the way people play. So keeping the cube looking like a cube, I think, is a great way to kind of get cube enthusiasts into it, because like when I copied this list, it was like, what do I need? Okay, cool. This is a cube list. I know what this is. I can work with this, and then we work out the bit that's different afterwards. I think that is a great starting point for this. But like going forward, like there isn't really anything tying you to be like because of the way the drafting works. You're not like taking cards off your opponent. You don't need to read signals. It doesn't matter if everyone's in blue. Like you could very much make a fully you could cut white from this, and it wouldn't actually make a difference to the gameplay, if that makes sense. Apart from missing the it doesn't. What I'm trying to say is it doesn't have to be as balanced as it is. But I think starting off like this is a good place for people to kind of like explain, because from what I've seen, kind of like basically, I think if you're already in a cube play group, you're more likely to be able to do this easy, because like you're used to organizing drafts and getting people to a place to do this kind of thing. I think kind of this format feels very cube adjacent, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Yes, for sure. It's very it's all like almost all cards, it's very balanced. It feels like it has been tested a lot. And yeah, I think like the cards, you can pretty much all like see why they're in there. They're all contributing something. There's a few things that feel like kind of power outliers, if you will. Stuff like, I think the persist stuff is very, very powerful. I could see a world where you want the persist stuff. I mean, I'd like it being there, but I could see a world where you want to get rid of like the 2-mana persist creature, for example. It does just feel very, very efficient and kind of easy as a way to kill someone. I think the only times I felt it was the cube wasn't playing perfectly was if you kind of luck into a good combo early, then it can feel like you're kind of running away, because you're winning all the games because you have a good combo and no one else does, and you're and some of the combos are very mana efficient, and then you can just you don't have to burn your treasures to look for more cards, and the only cards you do need to pick up are like more ways to protect the combo. So I wonder if like maybe a couple of the combos could do with costing 1 more mana, like just cut Putrid Goblin for a 3-mana persist creature, as an example. But I think, in general, I have like really no criticisms of the way the cube is built. I think you could maybe add slightly different ways to target specific decks. So I know Ryan said he likes having the targeted cards, and I agree. I think they're good. But some of them do sometimes feel like they're a little slow or a little too easy to interact with. Stuff like Meddling Mage is meant to be in there as a way you can stop your opponent when you know what they're doing, right? But in reality, that's like a sorcery speed creature that you can kill. And I was wondering maybe something like for the graveyard decks, for example, like Fairy Macabre would be a really cool way to break those up, because it's something you can't counterspell and you can't remove from play. That's the it's like a 3-mana flyer. You can discard it from your hand to exile 2 cards from a graveyard. So it's also like it is on a creature, right? So when you play against someone else, it is a creature you can cast an attack with. but against the combo deck, it's pretty hard for them to interact with. So it forces them to either have another plan or have like a stifle, which feels very hard to do. I like the idea of you can force people to have another plan, right? They can't just run their same combo into their opponent's deck every single game, because your opponent has a way to trump that, which you can't beat just by having another counterspell, you know?
No, that's fair. I think I'd agree with that. I think in general, though, the list that Ryan's put together, I think works really well. It really does. You have your good generic bits. You have like your lightning bolt. You have your counterspell. You have the bits that you would expect to see in a cube. But then you have a nice level of selection that works within the rule set that has been put together with this, that he's put out. Like cards like the rack. We know that games can go to having no cards in hand quite quickly. The rack is a nice alternate win con. Like the cards that care about treasure, the cards that care about people having poison counters. These are cards that have been chosen to work within this framework, and I think they work quite nicely. Like a great example, actually, of a card that kind of like, if you like when you first see it, you're like, oh, that's cool. But then if you actually think about it, it's actually really, really strong. Is a card like Dark Depths. So Dark Depths, we know, comes into play with 10 ice counters on it. You can pay 3 to remove an ice counter from it, and when it has no ice counters on it, you make a 20/20 Squiddly Fish. And we all know that kind of like this and Vampire Hexmage or Thespian Stage is a way of cheating it out. But realistically, in this format, a very strong deck that I've seen, 4 bits of interaction or counter magic and Dark Depths. Because Dark Depths on an empty board, just over all the turns of the game, once you've answered everything your opponent is doing, you just pay 3 mana. They can't and you get you get a 20/20 indestructible flyer at the end of it. It's very cool if you kind of like there's been a lot of thought and a lot of care and consideration that's gone into kind of like the different synergies and the different decks you can build with that. There's a bunch of other really cool things that have been added that I want to highlight. That works really well with the Autobattler game loop that Ryan's put together. Like cards with Corrupted, for example. Like there's a card like Bring the Ending that's 1 blue for an instant, counter target spell unless its controller pays 2 generic. But it also has Corrupted. Counter that spell instead if its controller has 3 or more poison counters. So early game, this is kind of like a bad mana leak. But late game, because poison is a game mechanic in this, it works as a nice hard counter. Like you also have some ley lines and some of the chancellors in this. These are cards that if they start in your opening hand, they either come onto the battlefield or they have some kind of effect. In this type of environment where you have your whole deck in your opening hand, you know you're going to have this effect, you're guaranteed it. For me, that's very cool from like a game design point of view. I think it really helps the whole environment feel unique, but also still feel like Magic. All right, awesome. So we've kind of done an overview of the game system, like the rules of how the Autobattler works, and also the list that Ryan's put together as like a starting point. Let's actually go through some of the decks that me and James have built. If you don't mind me kicking off James, one of the favorite decks I built with this is Siege Rhino, with the card that lets it cast for any color of mana. Siege Rhino with the deck containing a land, Ephemerate, Snapcaster Mage, and Phyrexian Metamorph. So the joke with this is you are casting Siege Rhino like 5 times. And that is more than enough to kill your opponents. I really like this deck. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, this was really sick. You did this to me. I was not even mad about it. It was great. Yeah, so what was it? Like Siege Rhino, clone my Siege Rhino, flicker my Siege Rhino, something like that.
Yeah,
really good.
I think against you, I think I used the treasure to ephemerate it straight away. So it was at least doing 9 by the time I untapped for my next turn. And then, we had Snapcaster or Metamorph as a nice little backup in case you cast something or in case I just needed to rebuy the ephemerate. But yes, I thought that was a very, I didn't have to attack. And that was what was fun with this deck. I just ephemerated a bunch of times. That Siege Rhino, that was really cool. James, any decks that stand out to you that you've built?
Yeah, I had a couple. One that really made me laugh. It wasn't very good, but it did win a game, and it was. I had not had a good draft, right? I did the thing. This was, I think, the second or third time we drafted this format. So I wasn't very clued up to what I was doing yet. Had not developed a strategy, shall we say. And I'd done the thing where I felt like I had a good deck early. I was I just sort of took cards that gradually improved that deck, and I didn't build to anything, and my late game was rubbish. So I think I was already pretty dead at this point. There's nothing I do. There wasn't much I could do to compete. But I did have a lot of treasures, and what I did with these treasures was turn 1 Mayhem Devil, suspend Greater Gargadon, stacking a treasure, triggering my Mayhem Devil. Crack another treasure for Devastating Summons, which is the sack X lands make 2 creatures with power and toughness equal to the number of lands you sacked. So basically 2 more dudes, triggers Mayhem Devil again, twice actually, because you sack the treasure and you sack and then once for each land you sacked. And then sack all of the remaining permanents, including those tokens, to the Greater Gargadon, which is just enough triggers to deal 10 off Mayhem Devil, and that was a great time. It was not a good long-term strategy because I went from 5 treasures to no treasures in that game, but I sure did turn 1 someone and I had a good time doing it.
It is definitely a thing of like I think that highlights quite nicely something you said earlier of like early in the game the treasures are more important for the draft part, but later in the game, if you just need to win, if you're 1 loss away from getting max poison, crack those treasures, do whatever you need to stay in the game. I think an example of just like a pretty solid one that kind of like, it's not the most combo in terms of like as you think of it, but just like what one I found to work really well was it was the deck I mentioned earlier. It was so it was Dispatch, the if you have Metalcraft, single white exile target creature, and I had more than 3 treasures, so we had Metalcraft. That with an Eternal Witness, an Ephemerate, and a Flicker Wisp. I was just effectively, it's just how many times can you cast a exile spell? So you're always going to answer their threat no matter what it is, and then you end with like even just beating like it doesn't matter. Again, it doesn't matter how much you win by attacking and beating them down with an Eternal Witness is a perfectly solid way of winning a game if they have no creatures and no way of answering your one creature. Like it can be a 1/1 attacking over 10 turns. Like it doesn't matter. So I thought that was that isn't the most like exotic of decks, but it's just like it's the one I mentioned earlier where I had Eternal Witness and the Wooburg upgrade, so it cost double white in my mono white deck. I thought that was pretty solid.
Yeah, that's very strong.
The let's say the complete other end of that is one that friend of the show Josh Firetruck Modo put together. James, do you want to talk about this this menace?
Yeah, I think this is the best deck still I've seen in this format.
Yeah.
So Josh was on the draw because he was crushing everyone. He puts in a Leyline of Anticipation. I go to my upkeep on my turn. He casts a Putrid Goblin, which he's been doing his nonsense persist things with. I counter, he counters back. Fine. He flashes in a Warren Soul Trader, which is the sack a creature, make a treasure. So this with a Putrid Goblin is just pay 1 life, get a treasure. This the Putrid Goblin keeps coming back. Then he can flash in a Blood Artist. And the cracked thing about this, right, is that not only is he winning the game with a counter on my upkeep, it also generates him infinite treasures.
Yeah.
So he could, and that's such a hard lock to get through once someone's established that, because they can expend it breaks that paradigm, right, of you don't want to use all your treasures to win one game because you won't have them the next game. This wins him the game and gets him back up to max treasures with interaction. That was a bit of a level up moment for me in this cube where I was like, the things I would do is doing that wasn't enough. I need to be doing better things. That was really cool. And I actually think Leyline of Anticipation is really good when you get to the late game.
Yeah, it's worth a slot, basically, just giving all your stuff flesh.
Yeah, I think only if you know you're on the draw, because it's basically a mulligan on the play, right? But if you know you're on the draw,
if you're already winning, yeah. That was very much one of those moments where it was like this is the first, like, I think we played it once or twice before, and we invite Josh, and he just completes it immediedely. It's like, oh, that's frustrating.
That was impressive. There's been a lot of cool decks, though, honestly. Another one that comes to mind was just And someone got a True Name Nemesis and a Gold. Is it Gold Rush? Pretty early.
Gold Rush is cracked in this format.
Gold Rush is a card I would never ever put back if I see it. It's 1 green. You make a treasure, then target creature gets +2/+2 for each treasure you control. So basically, if you can keep a high treasure count, this is just going to be lethal on any unblocked creature. And it was True Name Nemesis with the haste upgrade, I think also with the cost 1 less conspiracy. So just turn 1, hasty True Name, Gold Rush, lethal. It has, I guess, the slight limitation that you can't be cracking a bunch of treasures to protect it, because then the damage of the Gold Rush goes down. But you did not have to expend a lot of resources there to get lethal, and it's pretty hard to interact with because obviously removal spells not so effective against True Name Nemesis.
Exactly, but it's nice that, like, we've talked about a bunch of ways of winning without having to attack, but it is nice in this format, in the list that Ryan's made himself. There is like a berserk, there is like slick shot show off. You can do stuff by attacking, like you can still win. Like attacking and blocking is still a part of this. It's just as things get stronger and the combos get higher, that's not always the case. But yeah, just it is nice that there are some very strong game-winning combos that do revolve around turning lads sideways.
Yeah, for real. I think the actual strongest deck I've had was I think my 4-card pile was something like Collective Brutality, Reanimate, Mere Battle Sphere, and I mean Ionize, 3-mana counter. So it's just every game I was on the draw, counter your spell, untap, Collective Brutality, you reanimate it, you die. And the savage thing is, right, that the discard outlet is Collective Brutality, because it's so hard to fight against, right? You can take that piece of interaction with your discard outlet.
Yeah.
That one felt very, very powerful. And they can't even counter the Collective Brutality, really, right? Like it doesn't do anything. Your Mere Battle Sphere is already in the graveyard.
I'll be honest, James, the more frustrating part of that was when we went up to 5 cards, you just added another counterspell.
Yeah, what's better than turn 1 lethal with a counter behind? Turn 1 lethal with 2 counters behind.
No, that was very good.
Yeah, well, I got past. I saw. I think it's An Offer You Can't Refuse. Blue counter a non-creature. They make 2 treasures. You can't really cast this card in the early game because 2 treasures is so big for them. But later in the game, 1 mana counter your thing is kind of phenomenal.
Those are some of the cool decks we've seen. Are there any other cool interactions that you've seen people do? That kind of it's not a whole deck, but kind of unique things that you're doing because of the rules set that we're working within.
So I think one of the things that comes to mind here is the no concessions rule is quite interesting. So this, I think, really goes off with cards like Ephemerate. There's a lot of creatures in this list for ETB and Make a Treasure. And sometimes you're like, well, I've won this game. Oh, wait, no, I don't want to attack because I want to ephemerate my guy that makes a treasure, and then I want my ephemerate to be bound, so I make another treasure. And then I will attack for lethal. This can also work in the negative way. I think we've both experienced the Liliana of the Veil situation at one point or another.
Yeah. How, James? Yeah, I do want to explain to everyone how miserable that is in this world where treasures are a resource that you're really trying to cultivate and put a lot of work into.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the players in our group have experienced this by now. But in this scenario, right, where maybe you exchanged a card early on in your 3-card game, and then you play out your last creature, you pass the turn, they have 1 card, they have a card in hand, something in play. What's the worst that can happen? They go Liliana with a Veil, edict your creature, and you're like, okay, fine, nothing else happens. If they win, if they have a creature in play, we draw otherwise. Turns out that's not what happens. What happens, because you can't concede, is they'll tick up their Liliana a bunch. Both players discard cards, nothing happens. Then they'll ultimate their Liliana, which is they split your permanents into 2 piles, and you get to pick a pile to keep. So you keep the one with the most treasures in, right? Because you're not going to lose the game. None of your permanents do anything anyway. And you just want to keep the most treasures. But then they're not done. They'll just keep ticking up their Liliana and ultimating in on a loop until basically you end up with 1 treasure in play. And yeah, it can be really savage when you had your lovely pile of 4 treasures.
Yeah, that loop, the first time that happened, that was utterly miserable. on the topic of hitting treasures, it is something that I've done a couple of times. It's just like I ran an abrade in one of my decks, like the first kind of, as my kind of like cheap creature interaction, but I just used it in games I was already losing to just 2-mana destroy a treasure. That was like that's fine. That actually adds up to quite a lot of it's investing in your future by doing that. It's like I would rather I have a treasure than a poison counter. But if I'm losing a game and I can take a treasure off my opponent, then by God I am doing that. I do think it is quite fun. Like it's something. I'm kind of moving on to the like changes we make in terms of like the cube list, as it were. But kind of like one thing I think I want to look at is just ways of mucking around with treasure. Like we've heard people mention like our play group was like, oh, add meltdown, that would be funny. But like that might be a bit too strong, because it's just if you can build a deck that doesn't require treasure, just meltdowning, destroying all treasures doesn't really seem fun. But there is definitely ways you can either build your own list or you can look to making adjustments to the one Ryan Saxe has made. There are some interesting design questions that kind of come with this, and like it's definitely something that he must have asked himself in the first place when putting it together, because like it's things like mill does nothing, card draw does nothing, there's no like shuffle effects don't work, there's no deck, cards that cost more than 4 mana, if you only have 3 lands in play, kind of like what is the like how are we deciding the power level of these, like what gets in, how does it like how are you making a card that's more than 4 mana worth it? Like multicolored cards, like you only start with 3 lands, like it means that like you can't naturally cast like your Mantis Rider and a Berserk without using an additional source of mana. Those are interesting questions, and kind of like I think one thing we found, and it's like something to kind of again questions you have to ask yourself, is like 2 for 1, like 2 for 1s are incredibly strong. So that means creatures that make additional bodies are incredibly strong, because again you only have to have 1 point of power more than your opponent over the course of the game to win it. So like one thing we found is like that most of the removal is 1 for 1, and like we found like I think Breya, like the 4-color legend, to be very strong because it makes two bodies.
Yeah, and the 4 different colors of mana is just not as much of a downside in this cube as it would be normally. You just have 1 of each basic, which is fine anyway, and then you have to subtract 1 treasure. Like it's actually not that different from costing like 3 and a blue, you know?
No, definitely. And like there's some other things in terms of like if you wanted to make changes to this or make your own, that kind of like you can kind of consider. Like I know from the notes that Ryan's put together, kind of like things like, because poison is a way of tracking the life total. Like it's the meta life total in this. Like infect creatures and things with proliferate. Like we've talked about adding, but I think it just becomes a bit more miserable, because effectively you can just take a player out of the game. Again, it's like the Liliana of the Veil thing of like putting them down to 1 treasure. Like there could be loops in this where just like out of nowhere you just take a player out of the game and then they're not sitting, and like maybe you can't do it to someone else and you just kill someone early. Kind of that doesn't seem like a fun. Like if you're just building the most powerful version of this, then maybe maybe it's there, but kind of like from like an actual enjoyment point of view, I think not including poison and proliferate was a good choice when it was put together.
Yeah, honestly, I don't like the idea of proliferating poison counters at all, because right, realistically, you know, we're all trying to win, but this is a game we're going to go and play in a pub or someone's house or whatever with our afternoon, where it really sucks if you get killed on like turn 2, because on like the second game, because someone proliferated your poison 1 million times or hit you with a 10 power infect creature. I feel like the feel bad there is just not worth the upside. Like it would be cool if it happens in like round 4, right? When and like someone's really far ahead, and then you can get this huge poison hit in and knock them out. That's sweet, but I don't think it's worth the downside of you randomly knock someone out on like the second game of the whole cube, and then they're just annoyingly sat around while 3 other people play Magic for the next 2 hours.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. One thing that kind of works the other way, though, is that like there are like in the base list Ryan's made, he has included things like the 12 mana spell of Lumbering Mega Sloth, 10 green, 8/8 Sloth Mutant. This spell costs 1 generic less to cast for each counter among players and permanents. and it comes in tapped and has trample. But like later in the game, if both players have 5 poison counters, this is green for an 8/8 trample.
Yeah, that's kind of sick.
Yeah, like this is kind of like harking back to what I said at the start. Kind of like it's a it's a new lens of looking at Magic. Basically, it's finding things that work within this rule structure, and kind of like I think the list that Ryan's put together is really good for that. And there's a budget version. I think there's a peasant version or a pauper version, which could be even more budget. Like for full disclosure, when I proxied the Treat Yourself cube, I also proxied this as well in the same order. So nice and cheap. We love that for us. We're going to move on to now kind of like us talking about like things that like we could either add because we've had our hands on the list for a couple of months now, and we've been playing this relatively regularly. We've kind of got, when we first put this together, the first thing was like, okay, we get the loop, we get the gameplay, this is cool, we're enjoying this. But like from a design point of view, I hadn't really wrapped my head around how to actually build this yourself or how to make changes. And kind of from listening to Ryan Saxe talk about it and from reading things about it, the general thing you're trying to do is effectively you're trying to start with the end hand and work backwards. So like, what does like a final hand look like? Kind of like think of it in terms of like a 5 or 6 card final hand of like you have 1 to 3 cards of synergy, you have like 1 to 2 bits of interaction, 1 to 2 bits of protection and stuff like that. And kind of like, what does your cool deck look like? And I'm like, we've already described some of those. Like we described like the multiple Siege Rhino deck. Its plan was play multiple Siege Rhinos. Like in the combo persist deck, that's like those were the bits that kind of put it together. Kind of like, so what me and James have done, and we don't know each other's of these. This could be quite fun because I'm definitely up for adding some of these to the list that we're playing with and kind of making it more customized and making it our own. Kind of like, James, do you want to kick off? Do you want to give me like a 5 or 6 card deck that you have put together that we could conceivably add to our list?
Yeah, for sure. So I've got a few utilizing one of the same card because I think it would be a really sweet ad, and I think there's really cool stuff you could do with it. So the first one is if we're on the draw, I think we have a counter spell in there to interact on that turn. We need 1 Beast Sense speed removal, respect the game. Then on our turn, we're gonna have some forests. We're gonna cast a channel.
Oh, James, are we? Let's go. Okay, love that. Okay.
Then we're going to channel out our Defense Grid. Defense Grid is a 2-mana artifact. Spells cost 3 less. Spells cost 3 more if it's not your turn. So it's going to make it hard for our opponents to interact with us, and it costs colorless mana. So it's only costing us life for our channel. We do only have 10 of that life, but it does only cost us life. Because we only have 10 life, our next spell is going to be Weather the Storm. This is the 1 green gain 3 storm.
Okay, I'm glad we went with the storm package. Good. Okay, where are we going with this, James?
And then so we spent 2 life on Defense Grid, so we're down to 8, but we gained 9 off Weather the Storm. That then gives us enough life that we can card cast our Emrakul.
Are you actually going Emrakul? Okay, fuck yeah, nice.
Yeah. I think Emrakul's sick. I think it's actually not that broken in this cube as well, because you start on 10, right? So the channel's not so good.
But annihilating treasure tokens might be. Is that too strong?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
That's exactly what I'm here for. That's exactly what I'm here for. Yeah, I think Emrakul's cool. You probably need to take out Show and Tell, I suspect, if you're adding Emrakul. I think Show and Tell Emrakul with haste is a bit much. But I think outside of that, there's nothing else that's completely broken with it. And I'm kind of here for Emrakul,
That's cool. I guess there's any other big flying thing. We are wanting to kill them in one shot, I'm assuming, with this. But yeah, that seems sick. I love that. I was also thinking storm at some point. The one I have, James, so what I'm expecting is your decks to be built well, and your decks to be like 2 or 3 cards and some interaction. Mine are not. Mine are just, here are 5 cards I think are cool, and there's a cool loop. Let me give you one with that. This one actually has 2 bits of interaction in it, James. What do you think of this? Okay, Firestorm.
Okay.
Firestorm is a single red. Choose and discard X cards. Firestorm does X damage to each of X target creatures and or player. So let's say we're on the play. We can do 4 damage to our opponents. Let's do that. We're going to discard, James, Vengevine, Rootwaller, and Fiery Temper. So we've already dealt them 4.
Okay, yeah, I'm into this.
Yeah. As we've already dealt them 4 off Firestorm.
We Madness Fiery Temper to deal them 3.
The Vengevine goes in the bin first. We can cast... we then Madness in the Rootwallers. The Vengevine will trigger... Coming back into play off of us casting 2 creature spells that turn, we then swing for 4, and that's 10. There's a turn 1 win with a Vengevine in this format. I think that's vibey. Again, it is technically 2 bits of interaction. They are going face in this scenario rather than protecting yourself. But I did want something with Rootwallers. I was also trying to build around 1 with nothing, the card that just says single black discard your hand. There is something there with Rootwallers, but I don't know what it is yet. I thought that was quite cool.
Yeah, that's kind of sick.
I thought that one was fun.
Yeah,
I love Firestorm. I think it's cool.
I'm continuing along the cast something giant route. So I think for Pile, again, there's a big difference if we play draw, but I think I wanna start off with a discard spell here. The reason I'm starting off with a discard spell is it's all a bit fragile after this. We do die to a lot of things here. So we're going to have a discard spell, and we're going to have some very cheap piece of counter magic, I think. Maybe an offer you can't refuse, I think, would be a pretty good one here. Then we get into the spicy bit. So fans of the genre are going to have to forgive me for my pronunciation here. I've never tried to say this card's name. I'm going to go with Ezio Auditore da Firenze. This is an Assassin's Creed card.
Hold on. By fans of the genre, do you mean Italian?
I more meant Assassin's Creed, but also the Italians. Also the Italians will have to forgive me. Ezio is 1 black for a 3/2 menace. Assassin spells you have cast have 3 running black. I'm not going to read that what that means because no one cares. Whenever Ezio deals combat damage to a player, you may play Wooburg if that player has 10 or less life. When you do, that player loses the game, Dan.
That is an interesting one.
I think this is cool because it costs you probably a bunch of treasures to do.
Yeah,
right?
that's
You've got to play Wooburg.
At least 3 in theory. You have a black already in your deck. You have 2 other colors. Actually, no, it's probably costing you. Yeah, it's costing you at least 2 treasures to do, but more potentially if you have to remove something or protect it, I guess.
Yeah, and you definitely have to protect this, right? Because it's you're planning to hit them with a 3/2. I think you definitely need the conspiracy that gives it haste as well. But I think this is a cool card to add because I think I like this actually works. You have 10 or less life. I like that they can interact with it with blockers potentially, or they can remove it. But it works well for conspiracies, and it's a pretty sick win condition. It is powerful. It might be too powerful. I don't know, but I think it's cool.
Yeah, I think it really incentivizes. Like, if you, that's the thing. Like, I mean, True Name is in this. Like, it's probably like what's stronger, Ezio or this? Like,
yeah, no, totally. I think if we're allowed True Name, we're allowed Ezio.
No, cool. Yeah, definitely one we could test. All right, my next one, James. So my next one is actually a bit of a package. So we can kind of so the hand is probably a bit of interaction. We then have either Zombie Infestation or Forbid. Zombie Infestation is an enchantment that you discard 2 cards to make a 2/2 zombie, or Forbid is 3-mana counterspell with buyback, discard 2 cards. So either of those, combined with Squee Goblin Nabob and Master of Death. With that, we are either making, over the course of a game, an infinite... So Squee and Master of Death both come back to your hand on upkeep if they're in your graveyard. So the gimmick here is we're either making a slow army of zombies with Zombie Infestation, or we have a counterspell every turn.
That's pretty sick, actually. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. That's very cool.
There is also a redundant one of these effects. Do you know what Kravakan Horror does, James?
Is it a really bad squee?
Yes. It's 4 mana
Cool.
2/2. At the beginning of your end step, if this card is in your graveyard with a creature card directly above it, you may return it to your hand. So if you're doing it, so it is a third squee or master of death if you already have the other one.
That is loose, but I like it.
It is loose, but I think it's cool. I did kind of go down a bit of a rabbit hole with these type of cards, like cards like Delirium Skeins, which is 3 mana sorcery. Both players discard 2 cards. If the cards you're discarding is squee, again, if they have no creatures and you can beat them down with a squee, that's pretty solid. There is a world where maybe squee's too strong because it just cheeses all interaction. Actually, like it cheeses all creature removal, but it's cool.
I think that's fine.
Yeah.
And it's like a 3 mana 1/1, you know.
Yeah.
I think it's fine.
No, the squee lines was definitely something I would like. Yeah. So both of mine so far have been discardy matters ones. I promise I have something else for the next one. But you next, James. What do you have for your?
I'm returning to the Eldrazi train here.
Okay, good.
So next up, we've also got a discard outlet. I think we're going to go. We only need to discard 1 card though. So let's go Collective Brutality. That's a really nice interactive way to discard. We'll have, of course, I'm having a counter spell to back this all up as well. We've got a Heartless Summoning. We've got a Collective Brutality. We've got a counter spell. When we cast out Collective Brutality, we're going to escalate it. We'll choose a Duress and some other mode. It doesn't really matter. We're going to discard our good friend Emrakul the Promised End. Emrakul the Promised End is going to shuffle back into our library at this point. You can have a library in this format, I think. You just don't start with one, but you can have a library. Once it's shuffled back in, we're going to cast Calibrated Blast. Do you know this card?
I do not.
Calibrated Blast is 2 and a red for an instant. You reveal cards from the top of your library until you hit a non-land card. Put the revealed cards on the bottom of your library in a random order. When you reveal a non-land card this way, Calibrated Blast deals damage equal to its mana value to any target. So I think for this card to work, you need like a couple of the Eldrazi that shuffle back in. Because obviously, otherwise you can never have cards in your library. I kind of like the idea of a few nonsense things to do with an Eldrazi, you know? And I think this is a good one.
Yeah, it's on the vein of like effectively it's a reanimation spell, which I like, but it's not like I think in this cube, like he's been quite good at like, or the version that we're playing with doesn't have Putrid Imp reanimate. That's a bit too linear. You need like a bit of extra work or a bit of extra spice with it. So yeah. I like Calibrated Blast is a little bit extra of a. It is the end result is good and it is an extra. Like when you put it together, you have built something which is cool. Nice. On the topic of libraries, so this is just a 1 card include that I think could be interesting, and that's Nexus of Fate.
That's cool.
Nexus of Fate is a 7 mana instant. Take an extra turn after this one. Nexus of Fate would be put into a graveyard from anywhere. Reveal Nexus of Fate and shuffle it into its owner's library instead. So basically, if you can cast this repeatedly, if you can repeatedly make 7 mana, you will take infinite turns. That could still be a draw. So with this, you need to have a way of making 7 mana and like an evasive creature, I guess. But like if you can in this format where you're starting with 3, in theory your deck is going to be like land like land ancient tomb counterspell this. Like if you commit to that and you get even that doesn't actually win you the game. It needs to be
that doesn't work.
No, it doesn't need to be like a manland or something like that. Like there is a 5-card hand that can win with Nexus of Fate. Like maybe there's a way of repeatedly making treasure. So like, but basically I think it's an interesting include. I don't know how you win with it yet, but there will be a sequence of events of making like infinite treasure in this where maybe you don't have a win con for it, but your win con is infinite turns. It is a cool, unique card that I think someone could break with this, basically.
Yeah, that's kind of sweet. I was actually thinking for random 1-card includes. It's probably actually quite bad, but Time Walk is low-key quite funny. Because it doesn't do any of the good things that Time Walk normally does if you just cast it on its own, right? It's you don't get the card back, you don't get your land drop.
Yeah.
None of it really matters. But like you can do Eternal Witness Ephemerate Time Walk is infinite turns.
That's nice. Yeah.
And maybe there's something there, you know? You need like a bunch of other stuff to do with a Time Walk, but I haven't worked out fully what it is yet. But it would be kind of funny to me to have Time Walk in as a very narrow combo card.
I kind of like that. Yeah, I mean, I've lost to that a bunch in Canadian Highlander, but yeah, I can see that. Yeah, it does. It's not as just generically strong. It is a build around synergy card, which is quite fun.
Yeah.
Nice, I like that. All right, I have a quick couple more, James, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, go for it.
So this is just a single card include. I did it in the Blue Nothing Cube recently. Ephemerate's in. Why don't we just add a Chroma Angel of Fury?
Oh, that's a cool one.
Because it's a 3-mana morph that you can flick up to become a Chroma. That's a cool thing to do in this. Like it's the other one I had, and this is another little package I think you could run of. There are 2 massive equipments that make a creature more than a 10/10. So there's Colossus Hammer and Belt of Giant Strength. There is then Pure Steel Paladin to equip it. There's Arden. There's Kazul Toll Collector or Auriok Windwalker. There isn't really much in the way of... So there's like Nettle Cyst, but I think that's in it more already just for a living weapon. Gets bigger with treasures in play. But I think there could be a little equipment package in there maybe. Like it's the one thing that I think is actually kind of missing in terms of being represented as a deck we see other places. So I think that one could be quite fun. Do you want to hear my bad Storm deck, James? Yours actually sounds really cool. So I mean, it's kind of generic actually. So it's a counterspell, then Cabal Ritual, Poetic Ritual, Yorgmoth's Will, and then either Tendrils of Agony or Ignite Memories and hope your opponent has a card in hand.
Sick.
Like it, I think this is something that kind of like I want to tailor more. Like basically, I think the list that Ryan's made, the cube aside from the rule set, just from looking at the cube, I think what he's put together is a great base and works really well, and is like there's something a bit there for everyone. Like there's like tribal synergy, or like there's like creature matter synergies in here as well, which kind of like I think works for like for more generic people. But like basically we play with some degenerates, James. So I think Storm is something that will kind of suit our like there must be something cool we can do with like an LED in this cube, this kind of stuff. Like there'll definitely be some cool synergies we can build around. Like I think Storm is something that I would like to add. Like I think from because the games are quite short, it is but like playing the game is a small part of the game. Building the decks is just as important, if not more important, than actually playing the game. So therefore, if you're building this cool engine, and if it happens to be Storm and you get all the bits, then I think it could be rewarding. It's just working out which bits can, like with any cube, can overlap with other decks and other parts. Like I think like from a design point of view, like one card putting you up a mana is something we see in the cube, like just lands. If you think about it from a game design point of view, a land in this. If you put a land in your like if you put a Badlands in your 3-card deck, it is a card that is only in there to put you up a mana. That's kind of what Cabal Ritual is doing. It is one card that's putting you up a mana. Ancient Tombs in here, City of Traitors are in here. I think rituals are actually fair cards in this. They are all effectively lands for one shots. So doing something there, I think, kind of works within the rules that have already been set out. But I think could be quite cool.
Yeah, for sure. I was thinking a bunch about Storm cards as well, actually. I think the way that's interesting to me to get to use Storm cards in this cube that I think could work quite well with all the conspiracies is things that let you cast the same spell infinite times. So I'm thinking about things like Burgee plus Grinning Ignis.
Oh, okay.
Is kind of cracked. Then you can just keep casting the Grinning Ignis, you go up mana, and that seems quite powerful, and then you can just grape shot them. Although, actually, having just thought about this, that's Grinning Ignis is way completely broken, you can never put it in this cube. Because there's a conspiracy that makes it cost 1 less. Yeah, okay, that's a bad idea because you don't even need the Burju, right? It's you just make Grinning Ignis cost 1 less. You can cast it infinite times.
Yeah, that's a vibe.
Or you make it cost 2 less and you also have infinite mana. Okay, that was a bad idea. The other one that came to mind was, do you know Asherek the Archlich?
The one that goes through the dungeons a bunch of times.
Yes, it's like a 3 mana legends, a 5/5. When it enters, if you haven't completed the Tomb of Annihilation, which is one of the dungeons, you venture into a dungeon and it comes back to your hand. So this is interesting to me in that you can make it cost 1 less, which obviously helps a lot. You can also make it, you can cast it for any colors. So if you make infinite mana of any of the colors, you can cast it infinite times. Because once you can cast it infinite times, it does kill them, right? Because you just keep going through a different dungeon. One of the other dungeons like deals 1 damage to them at some point. So you never complete the Tomb of Annihilation. You keep recasting it, and eventually they die. So we just need ways to be able to cast it for free, basically. I was thinking you could do some nonsense with like Heartless Summoning, which is the 1 black enchantment. Yeah, your creatures cost 2 less and they're smaller. Who cares? If you do that with like a Relic of Legends or something, or some other way to make, or you just have another way to make infinite mana, right? Like, I think this is a cool infinite mana sink if you wanted to include stuff like Devoted Druid in the cube. So I think Devoted Druid could actually be quite strong because you have the ability to give it haste, right? That's always the issue with Devoted Druid, is that it doesn't have haste. So you could have like Druid and Vizier or something as a little package.
So Devoted Druid and Swift Configuration are currently in the list that Ryan's got. I just don't think
really?
we've seen it fully come together yet.
Oh, I've literally not seen a Devoted Druid in like 5 drafts or whatever we've done. Okay, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, that seems like a cool one. Yeah, I like Asherek. Maybe if there's a few like ways to make infinite mana or make it cast for free, I think that could be quite cool.
Yeah, doing stuff with infinite mana is another thing. I can see why, from a starting point of view, if this is like the list you're putting out, might not be for everyone, have a little sprinkling in. But I think it's something that kind of, again, one thing I like about this list is that kind of it seems like a very good base. You can tailor it to suit your play group, and I think that kind of like one thing that kind of like hopefully people are kind of getting from me and James talking about is that we both really like this, and kind of like it is definitely like a thing about like it. We have a side WhatsApp group where we're just like talking about this kind of stuff, and like we will probably be talking about this more tomorrow as we actually start making updates. So yeah, this is a really fun format. I think it's really like a testament to how well it's built and how well it's put together. It's just like we just really like talking about it. We could go on about this for hours, James, but I think with that, let's call it there.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
Nice. I know that from seeing Ryan talk about this before, he is looking for feedback on this type of cube. Or he is looking for feedback. So I will also put a link to the Discord for Autobattlers in the show notes below if you want to give any feedback directly. This is a very cool and unique kind of playing pattern, and I'll also put a link down to Learning Ready Run played an earlier version of this, so you can kind of see what it looks like, see if it's right for you. But like honestly, if you and your friends like drafting, like cubing, I think you will love this. Proxy it up or get the budget versions. I'll put links to everything in the notes below if you want to try it out yourself. Would highly recommend. All right, that's going to do it for today. It's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from James. Until next time, we'll see you all soon. Goodbye.